There is an uncomfortable truth most people never tell you, and if you stay with it, it may change how you see yourself. If you were truly lazy, you wouldn't feel guilty every time you avoid studying. Truly lazy people sleep peacefully, but you don't. You scroll on your phone while a voice in your head keeps whispering, "I should be studying," and that feeling alone proves the problem isn't willpower or discipline, but a silent conflict happening inside your mind. You can watch countless videos about effective learning, download productivity apps, build perfect plans, yet the moment you actually open a book, your body resists. You feel heavy, restless, uncomfortable, as if an invisible force is pulling you away from the desk. People call this laziness, but in reality, your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do: avoid pain. Your brain doesn't care whether you become better next year. It cares about one thing only: whether you are safe right now. And because learning is often linked to judgment, comparison, and the risk of proving that you are not good enough, when you try to begin, your brain doesn't ask, "Will this help me grow?" It asks, "Will this hurt?" And if the answer, even slightly, is yes, it pulls you away from that pain using the phone in your hand. The real danger isn't procrastination itself. It's believing that you are lazy and starting to hate yourself. Because the moment you turn against yourself, you lose before you ever truly begin. And in this video, we won't talk about iron discipline or quick study hacks. We will look directly at the real reason you can't start. We are living in a strange era where humans have never had more tools to learn, yet have never felt more exhausted and helpless about studying. Because the problem isn't knowledge itself, but the invisible pressure surrounding it. Within minutes of scrolling online, you see young people succeeding earlier, learning faster, being more disciplined, and silently your brain begins to compare, to question why you are still struggling. From that moment, learning stops being a normal activity and turns into a test of worth, a place where you must prove whether you are good enough. When learning becomes tied to self-worth, the brain no longer sees it as growth, but as a threat to identity. Because every page now carries the risk of failure, the risk of falling behind, the risk of facing the truth that you don't match the perfect images you see everywhere. And when that pressure grows heavy enough, the brain chooses the safest option: procrastination. Because not starting means not failing yet, not being judged yet, not having to face the deepest fear of modern life, the feeling that you are losing. Imagine someone like you, let's call him Alex. He could be a final year student or a young office worker. It's 9 in the evening, the room is quiet, the laptop is open, the to-do list is clear. And inside Alex's head is a familiar promise that tonight he will finally change. Alex sits down, opens the first document, and the moment his eyes hit the screen, a resistance appears, not sleepiness, but a heavy, undefined discomfort, as if his body is quietly signaling that this place is not safe. Small but convincing thoughts begin to surface. This section is too long. This will take forever. Will I even do this well? Maybe I should make some coffee first. And minutes later, he stands up, comes back, and opens his phone under the harmless excuse of checking messages or email. 5 minutes pass, then 15, then an hour. Alex is still sitting there, but his mind has left the room. And the more he scrolls, the heavier a familiar pressure builds in his chest. Guilt. Yet paradoxically, that guilt makes it even harder to turn the screen off, because doing so would force him to face the truth that an entire hour has passed without doing what he promised himself. Near midnight, Alex closes the laptop, nothing truly absorbed, and before falling asleep, he tells himself tomorrow he'll start over. But deep down, Alex knows that unless something changes, tomorrow will likely look exactly like today, not because he is lazy, but because he is trapped inside an invisible prison built within his own mind. What Alex just experienced isn't a personal flaw or a lack of discipline. It's a biological conflict unfolding inside the brain, because the human brain was never designed for deep learning in the modern world. Inside your head, two systems are constantly fighting for control. One is the primitive system that seeks immediate pleasure and avoids pain. The other is the prefrontal cortex, responsible for long-term thinking, planning, and discipline. And the problem is that these two systems are not equally strong. The rational system is intelligent but quickly fatigued, while the primitive system is loud, powerful, and hyper-alert to any sign of discomfort. When Alex sits down thinking he must focus and study for 2 or 3 straight hours, the primitive brain instantly interprets that as a threat. It sees boredom, exhaustion, and the risk of failure. And to protect Alex from those feelings, it grabs the steering wheel and swerves toward the safer option, the phone. The phone is not just a distraction, it is an instant dopamine hit that numbs discomfort, allowing Alex to temporarily escape the pressure to focus and the fear of not living up to his own expectations. And this isn't a failure of willpower, but an ancient survival mechanism operating in an environment where carefully engineered stimuli are designed to overpower fragile human attention every single time. But there is an even more subtle trap keeping Alex stuck: the illusion of perfection, the kind that can kill learning before it ever truly begins. Alex doesn't just want to study, he wants to do it right, to understand everything deeply, to perform well, and that single thought, if I can't do it perfectly, I'd rather not do it at all, turns every study session into a massive psychological burden. When the brain faces a task framed as all or nothing, understand everything, remember everything, get it right from the start, it responds by freezing, because biologically, this feels like standing at the base of Mount Everest and telling yourself you must reach the summit in one breath. The result isn't slow progress, it's total inaction. This all or nothing thinking ties Alex's self-worth directly to outcomes, and when the risk of failure feels too high, the brain chooses the safer option, procrastination, which at this point becomes a psychological strategy, preserving a familiar excuse that he simply hasn't truly tried yet, and with it, the comforting identity of someone with potential. Beneath Alex's procrastination lies more than habit or mental fatigue. There are old fears that were never given a name. Each time Alex opens a book, what truly gets activated is not knowledge but memory. Memories of being judged, compared, disappointed, and even though Alex is an adult now, those emotional imprints remain intact in the subconscious. The inner child still believes that making mistakes leads to rejection, that failure equals being unworthy, and so doing nothing becomes the safest choice. At the same time, another mechanism is at work: the ego, a fragile self-image, constantly trying to protect itself. If Alex doesn't study and fails, he can still tell himself he didn't really try, that his potential remains untouched. But if he tries his hardest and still fails, the cost would be the collapse of his identity. And when Alex begins to force himself with harsh commands, the voice in his head no longer belongs to the present. It echoes strict authority figures from the past. The rebellious part inside rises in response, not through loud defiance, but through quiet sabotage, through prolonged procrastination, through endless late-night scrolling, simply to prove that he still has control. This internal war drains more energy than any study session ever could, which is why you can learn nothing and still feel completely exhausted, as if you've just survived a real battle. Alex's problem was never a lack of discipline. It was that he turned learning into a battle that had to be won, and in any battle, the body stays in a defensive state. Every time Alex tells himself, I must study now, I need to focus harder, I can't be lazy anymore, the brain doesn't hear motivation, it hears commands, and commands always trigger stress. Once stress is activated, deep learning becomes nearly impossible, because the brain is no longer in learning mode but in survival mode. The irony is that the harder Alex tries to force discipline, the heavier everything feels, not because he is weak, but because the brain instinctively resists being controlled. Humans don't just fear failure, we fear losing autonomy, and when learning turns into an obligation, the rebellious part inside will do whatever it takes to reclaim freedom, even if the cost is procrastination, guilt, and exhaustion. In that moment, discipline stops being a tool for progress and quietly becomes the enemy that pushes Alex further away from the desk. Once Alex stops treating learning as a battle, what he needs isn't iron discipline, but a change in how he speaks to himself, because the brain responds powerfully to language. When you tell yourself, I have to study, The brain hears danger and stress is instantly activated. But when you say, I'm just curious to see what happens, the brain begins to lower its guard. That difference may seem small, but it completely changes the biological response inside your body. Commands create pressure. Curiosity creates movement. When curiosity appears, natural dopamine is released, not the cheap dopamine from endless scrolling, but the kind that supports focus, connection, and deep learning. In that state, studying stops feeling like coercion and becomes a gentle action, one where you are allowed to enter without having to prove anything. Learning isn't a fight against laziness, it's a conversation. And the moment you stop fighting yourself, the energy once burned in internal conflict finally becomes available for real understanding. Once Alex stops treating learning as a battle, the next step isn't changing his entire life, but giving his brain a safe entry point. Because the brain doesn't need big leaps. It needs signals that things are under control. Instead of promising hours of focus, Alex makes a simple 2-minute agreement with himself. No pressure to understand deeply or remember anything, just open the first page and look at the first line, because the hardest part is not studying but starting. Before learning, if the mind is crowded with anxiety and self-criticism, don't force concentration. Spend a few minutes writing everything out, without structure or polish. Simply moving the noise out of your head so the system has room to run. And once you begin, don't drain your energy to the last drop. Leave the desk while a small spark of curiosity still remains. Because that unfinished feeling is what makes the brain look forward to returning next time, instead of fearing it. If there is one thing you should take with you after this video, it's the truth that you are not a machine that needs fixing. You are a human, learning how to live in harmony with yourself. There will be days when learning feels smooth and clear, and days when nothing happens at all, and that doesn't mean you failed, it simply means you are human. When you stop turning every study session into a courtroom where you put yourself on trial, you realize that real progress doesn't come from force but from calm. And sometimes the biggest change isn't how much you learn in a day, but the first time you sit down, open a book, and no longer hate yourself for struggling.